My name is Ryan Cobley. I am the Veteran Service Officer for the town of Westford. Thank you for joining us on this Memorial Day celebration. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by the Westford Girl Scouts and remain standing for the opening blessing from Chaplain Arthur Pellerin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Uncover. Let us pray. Almighty God, giver of all victories, we thank Thee for the opportunities which abide in our land. For they the guidance of the hour of peril, and they the tender love in times of need. Help us to remember the reverence, the value, the devotion of our departed comrades. Not only those whose body consecrate our country soil, but also those who sleep beyond the seas, and those others whose resting place will not be known until the last day, when the deep will have given it up dead. Keep us forever firm in righteousness. Amen. Come up. Sergeant at Arms, salute our departed comrades.
Thank you. You may all be seated. As we gather here today, we are united in solemn remembrance to honor the brave men and women who gave their lives in service of our nation. Memorial Day is not just a day for barbecues and celebrations, but a day of reflection, gratitude, and deep respect for the ultimate sacrifice made by our fallen heroes. From the rolling hills of Arlington to the peaceful fields across our country, each headstone represents a story, a life, and a selfless act of valor. These soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard stood up tall in the face of danger, defending the ideals we hold dear: liberty, justice, and the pursuit of happiness. Today we stand in the shadow of their legacy, reminded that freedom is not free. It is a precious gift, bought with the courage and blood of those who believed in the promise of America. We owe it to them to live our lives with the same dedication to that principle and duty. Let us take a moment to acknowledge the families left behind. Their loss is immeasurable, and their strength is an inspiration to us all. They carry the burden of sacrifice every day, and we offer them our heartfelt support and deepest sympathies. As the sun sets on this day of remembrance, let us renew our commitment to uphold the values for which so many have laid down their lives. Let us pledge to serve our communities, support our veterans, and work towards a future worthy of their dreams. May we never forget the cost of freedom, and may the memories of those who have fallen guide us toward a more peaceful world. Now, please take a moment of silence as the Westford Boy Scouts carry out the flag folding ceremony in honor of the fallen.
The 13 stripes represent the original 13 states: Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Virginia, New York, North Carolina, and Rhode Island. The 50 stars represent our 50 United States of America. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country, but he stands it now, deserves the love and thanks of man and woman, Thomas Paine. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Declaration of Independence. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America, United States Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances, the First Amendment. The basis of our political system is the right of the people to make and alter the constitutions of government, George Washington. My God, how little do my countrymen know what precious blessings they're in possession of, and which no other people on earth enjoy, Thomas Jefferson. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, Abraham Lincoln. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the hopeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door, Emma Lazarus, inscription on the Statue of Liberty. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, Martin Luther King Jr.
It is my pleasure to introduce Massachusetts State Representative of the 2nd Middlesex District, James Cicero.
Thank you. Senator Cronin, members of the Westford Select Board, Ryan Cobley, Westford VSO, honorable veterans in attendance, I'm honored to be with you this afternoon. Memorial Day is one of our nation's most solemn and revered holidays, born solely of our shared American heritage. Together we recall the glory and sacrifice of all who set their personal aspirations aside for the preservation of our nation. We pause to remember the true cost of freedom and honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice to preserve and to protect it. The brave men and women we honor today, fathers, brothers, sons, mothers, sisters, and daughters, made the ultimate sacrifice so we can live in our great nation free of fear and oppression. Today, many Americans will gather with family and friends to usher in the summer season and celebrate this special time of year. But it's important that we never forget the real reason that we gather today. We come together to pray, to reflect, and remember these special Americans. A day when we honor the brave men and women who gave of themselves to ensure that we continue to live and grow and prosper in our great nation. Today we pay tribute to all those who forged our history and hold close the memory of those we recently lost. And even as we gather here in Westford, across the Commonwealth and across our great nation, citizens are pausing to remember to mourn and to pray and to pay silent tribute to our sisters and brothers who have sacrificed everything for our freedom and American way of life. Today, veterans from the greatest generation to the 9/11 generation pause to remember those loved ones lost in war. Boy Scout and Girl Scouts are placing wreaths and American flags on the graves of American heroes in cemeteries here in Westford and across the country. Gold Star families look at old pictures of vacations, first communions, graduations of their loved ones that they have lost and have left this world far too soon. But for those families who lost a loved one, this sad chapter in their lives will remain long after the guns of battle have fallen silent. Memorials tell a story. They tell our story, an American story, where young men and women gave of themselves for a greater good, sacrificing for all of us. But we must remember, especially today, that behind each American flag on every military grave lies a soldier, a parent, a child who has lost a loved one to war. Today we will notice mothers and fathers clutching old photos, reading faded letters, and running their fingers over shiny medals of sons and daughters gone from this earth, who laid down their lives in order that we may continue to live free in this nation. Those families who have lost loved ones in war and had their lives changed forever, our hearts go out, especially to those left behind, the sons and daughters of the fallen, the young men or women who will never have the opportunity to wed the one they loved, the young mother or father who will raise a child alone, mothers and fathers who face their greatest heartbreak to never see their child again. Today, just as much as years past, and just as much as in times to come, we need to remember and honor our courageous defenders who fought on, often in the face of overwhelming odds, to preserve the ideals that we hold so precious. Americans have never fought for empires, for territory, for dominance in this world. But many, many Americans have fought and died for freedom. Memorial Day is a time to pay tribute, a time to remember, and a time to reflect on what it truly means to live in freedom. We have an obligation as Americans to never forget those brave men and women who donned the uniform and gave their lives to ensure America always remains the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless our veterans.
Thank you, James. Now I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Geoff Hall.
This morning at Freedom Park, the Westford Historical Society dedicated a monument to a man by the name of Francis Michael Sullivan. I want to read what it says on that monument. Francis Michael Sullivan, 1897 to 1954. Director of Disabled American Veterans, the GI Bill of Rights. Francis M. Sullivan was born at Pond Street, Forge Village, Westford, Mass., 18 December 1897, and died in Washington, D.C., 24 January 1954, son of John and Nora Sullivan. He was a champion of American veterans over the span of 3 wars. His efforts resulted in many pieces of legislation to support veterans, his most significant accomplishment resulting in the GI Bill of Rights. It was given by the Westford Historical Society. Why 70 years after such great accomplishments did it take so long to get this monument built? Well, we didn't know about it. About 4 years ago, Marilyn Day and I were conducting, along with the Historical Society, a walking tour of Forge Village and researching Forge Village. And Patty Doobie from the clerk's office gave us this book that Francis Sullivan's son had put together. And it told of his life growing up in Forge Village, going to Cameron School, graduating from Westford Academy as a class of 6 people in 1916. From there, Mr. Sullivan went on to become he wrote for the Lowell Courier, I guess it was, for a while, and then went on to Connecticut, where he was also writing and was hired by a couple of congressmen. So he worked for 2 congressmen down there, and at the time, he also receives a degree from George Washington University. Upon his receiving his degree, Sullivan fulfilled his requirements for Congressmen Glynn and Edward Goss, also from Connecticut. And during this time, Mr. Sullivan presented cases before the Federal Communications Commission. Around 1940, Francis joined the legislative staff of the American Legion. A year later, December 7, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, war broke out, and once again, the world was at war. Mr. Sullivan, then working as active legislative director for the American Legion, wrote several pieces of legislation to tackle the important needs of disabled veterans returning from World War II. Sullivan gained valuable experience drafting that legislation while working for those congressmen. World War II was raging in 1943 when calls for legislation to address the needs of returning veterans were taking hold in the country. Keep in mind, those veterans who returned from World War I got $60 sent home and told, in 1945, you will receive a bonus. They wanted things to be different this time. Americans were expecting 16 million GIs to return home following the end of the war. Thus, the drafting of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act was developed to meet those needs. Francis Sullivan was given credit for gathering the information regarding the GI Bill and drafting the legislation. As acting legislative director of the American Legion, Sullivan drafted several pieces of legislation to help returning veterans, such as medical assistance for disabled veterans, housing assistance for homeless GIs, and employment support for returning veterans. Accordingly, the job of gathering the information and writing the comprehensive bill would fall to one writer. Sullivan's son, Richard, best summed up his father's contribution to the GI Bill when he stated, "So while the impetus of the legislation or public policy is the work of many hands, and it is, the final drafting of the work of one steady hand penning it all and penning the GI Bill was the contribution of Francis Michael Sullivan." Why was it obscured over time? Because Richard Sullivan said his father was not one who was going to take the credit for the passage. Richard Stell, in his History of the American Legion, gives credit to Sullivan directly for gathering the information and drafting the bill. Congresswoman Edith North Rogers, out of Lowell, a chief sponsor of the bill, stated on the floor of the House upon Sullivan's death that Francis had a large part in the writing of the so-called GI Bill of Rights and Veterans Preference Act. When President Roosevelt signed the GI Bill of Rights into law on June 22, 1944, Mr. Sullivan is in the center of the picture. President Harry Truman signed an extension of the bill. Francis, then director of the Disabled Veterans, is also on the picture with Congressman John F. Kennedy. Francis Michael Sullivan died January 4th at the age 1954 at the age of 56. Mr. Sullivan was survived by his wife Catherine Ann, his children Catherine, Francis, Richard, Leo, and Leo Sullivan. He was buried with honors in the Washington National Cemetery. So what did the GI Bill of Rights do? The service brought profound changes to the United States. Prior to its enactment in 1944, only 160,000 Americans were attending college. By 1950, 500,000. And half of them were veterans as a result of this bill. In addition to educational benefits, the GI Bill brought social and economic changes to the country. Its impact on the American people, the men and the women who fought in the war, were transformed by the act. The GI Bill changed Americans from poor working citizens who work with their hands entirely to professionals who work with their minds, from renters to homeowners. And those who came home racked with injuries that may have disabled them forever, there was a section set up to make sure that those people were cared for as well. The incredible work of this wonderful man should never have been overlooked, and I'm proud to say he was a resident of this town, and he contributed to that. We also have today here Kathleen and Frank Ashman. Would you stand? And Laura Friel. These are descendants. And it was a pleasure seeing their proud faces this morning down at Freedom Park. And thank you very much for coming up. Okay? Thank you very much for allowing me this great honor and opportunity today. And in your travels around town, stop down to see this wonderful monument to this very, very wonderful individual.
Thank you, Geoff. Now we also have Senator John Cronin here would like to share a few words.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Representative Arciero, members of the Select Board, veterans, thank you for making this ceremony special. I want to give a special thank you to everybody who's participating in the heat that is making this a solemn occasion, especially our police and firefighters, all the students and all the scouts that help make today special. So can we just give them a quick round of applause? Every Memorial Day, every Veterans Day, I'm reminded of what makes our service members special, about what makes our military special, about what makes the United States of America special, and the bond that all veterans share with our fallen service members and all those who have served. And that is the oath that service members take. And the United States of America is distinguished and unique in the oath that those who serve our country take. We do not pledge an oath to a president or a king or a queen or a political party or a manifesto. Every service member who raises their right hand serves and swears an oath of an allegiance to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And when they serve and when they sacrifice, they serve defending that oath and to support the high ideals that are enshrined in our Constitution. And that's something to take note of when we consider those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. 10 years ago, I served in Afghanistan with two men that were killed in action. Specialist Wyatt Martin, who was 22 years old when he gave his life to his country, and Sergeant First Class Ramon Morris, who was 37 years old when he gave his life to his country. And I'd ask everybody right now to close their eyes and think of over the last 10 years of your own lives, all the things that give you purpose and meaning and joy. The birth of a child, a marriage, a wedding, a new career, moments of laughter at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Specialist Wyatt Martin would be 32 years old today. Sergeant First Class Ramon Morris would be 47 years old. They'd be in the prime of their life. And it gives different meaning to what it means to give your life to your country and to serve a purpose that is greater to oneself. And I would ask everybody to take a minute this weekend between the barbecues and between these beautiful ceremonies to think about how in your own lives you and all of us together can commit and recommit to paying the debt that we owe all those who have served, but most especially all those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. And as we think and reflect about how we can make our communities and our country stronger, I would ask you to remember between now and November, we are just going to be told about how we are different as Americans and how much there is that divides us. And we need to think about the sacrifice of Ramon Morris and Wyatt Martin and remember that there is a whole lot more that brings us together and unifies us as Americans. And so I'd like to leave you with just the final words of President Abraham Lincoln, who was trying to unify a divided country in 1864, and his final words from his second inaugural address. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. This Memorial Day, God bless the town of Westford, God bless our United States of America, and God bless our fallen service members and our Gold Star families.
Thank you, Senator Cronin. Lastly, please welcome Westford Select Board Chair Scott Hazelton.
Thank you, Ryan, and good afternoon, veterans, Representative, Senator. One of the most moving Memorial Day speeches given was by General Lucian Trescott, commander of the U.S. Fifth Army in Italy in World War II. It was Memorial Day 1945. He turned his back to the audience and faced the graves of 20,000 Americans who are buried there, and he spoke to those veterans. Those are just some of the 1.1 million men and women who've died in wartime over our country's history. In perspective, that's more than the population of Boston. These numbers should truly humble us because they represent real people, brothers, husbands, mothers, sisters, friends, people who were parts of the fabric of our community. They were loved, they were mourned, and they were missed. Yet the reality is that for many of us, perhaps even most of us here today, we're here trying to commemorate something that we've never known. We've not lost family or friends to war. We want to frame the sacrifice of those who died in a more respectful manner than common themes of heroism and sacrifice. Yet we're painfully unaware or aware of our inadequacy in our own experience to truly empathize with those whose pride and heartache has experienced, who've lost comrades, friends, and other loved ones in war. In her book, The Republic of Suffering, historian Drew Gilspin Faust notes how Memorial Day emerged from the experience of Americans who lost loved ones in the Civil War. It shaped American attitudes and practices around wartime deaths and the responsibility of the living to remember them. 1 American in 50 died during that war. Given today's population of Westford, it would be as if we lost 500 of our neighbors. That personal loss was shared by almost everybody. Yet, since September 12, 2001, Just over 7,000 U.S. service members have died in conflicts around the world: Afghanistan, Iran, Syria. In comparison, we're out to less than 1 in 50,000 of us. That means that most Americans can't begin to comprehend the moment when you send a loved one off to war. To watch them disappear from your sight, knowing very well it may be the last time that you will see them, to hug them, to say you love them. Yet this has been a stark reality for many families in this country. So too have been the telegrams, the middle of the night phone calls, the chaplain visits to the front door, tell next of kin that the loved one has been killed. It's all too easy for those who never suffered such losses to see past the holes left in our families and communities. As Franklin Roosevelt once said, "Those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy now forget in time that men have died to win them." But Memorial Day is a chance to reconnect with those and the cost of our nation's freedoms. It's a day to ground ourselves in the reality that our veterans and every Gold Star family knows our way of life has been shaped and made possible by those who have served and those who have lost. I just like to reflect on one experience that I can't, not as moving as Senator Cronin, so I'm afraid, but picture a dark night in North Atlantic, February 3rd, 1943. 3 troop ships with escorts are traveling to Europe. And out in the sea is a U-boat who fires 1 torpedo and hits the SS Dorchester with 904 men on board, most of them troops and civilian sailors. It was a cold night, so they were down below decks trying to keep warm at 1 in the morning when the torpedo struck. As you can imagine, power went out immediately. Panic set in, men are trapped below decks. And yet 4 men who had no training as seamen — this is a civilian crew, not a military crew, they were only first lieutenants — they rose to the occasion. Apart from their heroes that night, they had very different backgrounds. Reverend George Fox was a Methodist minister. Reverend Clark Poling was Reformed Church of America. Reformed Rabbi Alexander Good also had a PhD. Father John Washington was a Catholic priest. They took charge. They guided men to lifeboats. They guided the wounded to safety. When life jackets were passed out, there were too few. They removed their own life jackets to give to others. They got as many men as they could to the lifeboats and then linked arms, saying prayers and singing hymns, and went down with the ship. It sank in about 30 minutes, and in those dark and frigid waters, only about 230 men were saved of the 904 aboard. One survivor, Grady Clark, remembered, "As I swam away from the ship, I looked back. The flares had lighted everything. The bow came up high, and she slid under. The last thing I saw, the 4 chaplains were up there praying for the safety of the men. They had done everything that they could. I did not see them again. They themselves had no chance without the life jackets." According to some reports, survivors could hear different languages mixed in the prayers of the chaplains: Jewish prayers in Hebrew, Catholic prayers in Latin, English prayers from the Protestant chaplains. This is the spirit, the sacrifice, and the unity of mission in our service women and men that we honor today. On this Memorial Day, we just spare a moment to think about those who've lost their lives fighting for liberty. I paraphrase Richard Nixon, 1974 at Memorial Day, when he observed that peace is real and the right memorial for those who've died in war. And whether we lose that peace and let it slip away will be the measure of our worthiness to their spirit and sacrifice. For those who gave their lives from Vietnam and Valley Forge to Bunker Hill and Baghdad, they set an example of self-sacrifice which, if followed in peace, will make it unnecessary for men to follow war anymore. Thank you for joining today in today's tribute. I hope you keep our military men and women and their families and the sacrifices they've made close to your hearts today and throughout the year.
Thank you, Scott. As we bring the service to a close, please stand to honor our military as the Westford Academy Band plays the national anthem, followed by the Westford and District Pipes and Drums with Amazing Grace. Thank you all for coming. Please be safe. This concludes today's service.